I cannot do it.
Oh, in the phone.
They're trying to set up
No.
If you want me to stay a little bit more here,
Yeah.
so otherwise we won't be able to see you. And, there are, right, yeah, you're too far, so the questions are really our limit of. Yeah. Can you guys see everybody in the portal here? Can you guys see everyone's faces?
Yeah. All good. Now we can close up. I have it. Shield. Okay. Yeah, just close up here. Yeah.
Anything with the only I was working fixing just the glaciers because I registered for several meetings. But actually, once the following meetings, and then there were like some waiting list. But then, if everything goes as planned, I'm attending the meeting with the Belgian delegation for less than half an hour because Laura from our part is not like if there's a oh, yeah, super nice.
That we're live already. So-
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Okay. Yeah. All good.
No, I think you're frozen. I'm not sure.
Can you hear me?
We can hear, but you're frozen also.
Should we check with? Okay. Okay, but you can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh,
Okay.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
You are all really clear for us, but I think there's an audio lag and you can't see us.
I think we can see you now. I hope we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, it's fine. Let's just get started.
And we can see in here.
Yes, we can see in here. Okay, so we'll just get started then, and you tell us if there is an issue. So welcome everyone to this session on feminist digital alternatives. Thanks so much for joining. I know it's super early in the morning. I hope you all got time to have coffee and breakfast. We have all had dinner, so we are all well fed. So, yeah, I thought that we could start with a round of introductions. And people can share where they are coming from, what their work has been, which movements you are working with. There is a lot of diversity in this room combined across the two cities. So we can bring all of that in the introductions. And just to flag that people will be speaking a bit slowly so that the interpreters can capture it. And I think there is a little bit of a delay. There's a couple of seconds delay between the interpretation. It's happening simultaneously, but it's a few seconds delayed. So just bear that in mind when we are speaking across Kannada and English. So yeah, I can get us started. I'm Ambika. I work with AVID. I work with the Building Feminist Economies team. And I have a long history of working in digital rights, so I'm super excited to be part of this discussion today. So why don't we have someone in New York? Maybe Cynthia, do you want to go ahead and then pass it back to us?
Hi, good evening.
I'm Cynthia. I work with the Association for Progressive Communications. I'm currently based in Montreal. And I work on a local access project with the city, and that makes
Okay, could you be a bit louder and slightly closer to the mic? No, the mic I think is in the front. We could get some of that, but not all of it, right? Yeah. Yeah, maybe try speaking a bit louder.
Can you hear me?
Yes, that was loud and clear.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Cynthia with APC, the Association for Progressive Communications. I'm currently based in Montreal, Canada. And I work on a local access project, looking at community networks around the world who are building their own communications infrastructures. And I work mainly on supporting the gender component of the work. So back to you, Ambika.
Yeah, do we want to start, Ramaka? Introduction.
Okay. My name is Ramaka. I'm coming from Maya in Bangalore. I work in area in Chennai.
Okay, yeah, could you hear that okay?
The last part, no. The last thing, she said no.
Yeah, okay. My name is Ramaka. You can't hear?
Yes,
Now you can hear?
yes, yes.
I am coming from Maya in Bangalore. I am working in Chennai.
Gender partner.
Yeah, you got that? Okay, yes, does someone else want to go in New York? Self-nominate.
You're the
Kia ora. Hello, everyone. My name is Eli Rubashkin. I am originally from Colombia, but I live in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I work as the Gender Identity and Expression and Sex Characteristics program at ILGA World. I work closely with intersex communities of the world, and we do platform intersex issues at the United Nations, treaty bodies and ecosystem. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Nisha Abdullah. I'm a independent theatre maker and an educator working out in Bangalore. My practice is political, so it's political theatre that I make, and also anti-oppressive. And as part of my work, I work with communities in various kinds of learning spaces, mostly to do with social justice, constitutional rights, peace education, gender sexuality rights, things like that. Yeah, I work across multiple age groups. Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, I'm happy to introduce myself as well. So lovely to meet you all. Let me stand up a little bit. I am Dan as well, and I'm the program manager of the Gender Identity, Gender Expression, and Sex Characteristics program at ILGA World. And I work together with my amazing colleague, Eli Rubashkin, and also Swell from Jamaica, and Angelica from... Angelica, do you want to go next, since I introduced you already?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dan. Good morning, everyone. I'm Angelica. I'm the chair of the Women's Committee of ILGA World, and I'm a trans feminist lesbian activist from Italy. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Okay, really nice to meet you all, and then
Hi everyone, my name is Meryl. I'm a lawyer by training, and I currently work as a researcher with IT for Change, which is a Bangalore-based nonprofit working at the intersections of digital rights, digital technology and society. At IT for Change, I'm primarily engaged in research and advocacy related to online gender-based violence and social media governance from a feminist perspective. And I'm very glad to be sharing the space with you all. Thank you.
And I think
Next. Okay, yeah. We can hear you, we can hear you. Oh no, it's gone. The audio is gone. It was back for a second and we've lost you again.
Oh, can you hear us
oh,
now?
now you'll hear us.
Okay.
Okay, fantastic.
Hi everyone. Good evening or good afternoon. I'm Sewell Anglin. I'm from Kingston, Jamaica. I work with ILGA World as a communications officer, and I've been doing work in LGBT rights and women's rights in Jamaica and throughout the Caribbean. Nice to meet everyone.
So sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to give a quick tech note. Should be able to pick up everyone's voices without being moved. And when you touch it, it may mute and unmute.
Yeah,
So
we
I
know this.
recommend leaving it in one spot
Okay.
and maybe just raising your voice a tiny bit in case you're not heard.
Thank you.
Sorry for the interruption.
Okay, so we are good to go. Padmini?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to see you. Somewhat. My name is Padmini. I'm the founder of a design and digital rights collective called Design Beku. We work on a range of things, but something that we are very dedicated to working on is also community networks. We've done a lot of work with ABC and Maya Health is a partner. So Ramaka is actually partnering with us, and they have a community network in Channapatna that we set up together. And that's a project that's been going for the last 4 years. So yeah, great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. And one last person here in New York. Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda McRae. I am the Director of United Nations Advocacy at Women Enabled International, which works to advance rights at the intersection in New York. So I am home, which is nice. I am a disabled woman though, and this space is a little disorienting for me because I have a visual disability. So apologies if I'm not speaking up. Please, give me some more movement and visual cues. That would be helpful for me. So thank you.
Yeah, we'll keep that in mind. Thank you, Amanda. And Mihira, you want to go next?
Hi everyone, I'm Mihira. I work with the All India IT Workers Union and All India Gig Workers Union chapters in Bangalore. Yeah, nice to speak to all of you.
Okay, I think we have. Folks want to introduce over? You want to go?
Okay. Hi, I'm Naveen. I work with Padmini and Ramaka on Design Beku. I also teach at Srishti, which is an art and design school in Bangalore.
Hi, I'm Ruchita. I work with Naveen, Padmini, and Ramaka. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Navita. I work with Cynthia in Association for Progressive Communication.
Yay! Yeah, it must be fun to see each other. Okay. Sorry, just give us a second. We are just having an issue with the translation. No, not working. Not working. Okay. Sorry, just give us 1 minute. We'll just try to fix this. Oh, come back. Okay, it will come back. We just hear the interpreters. It's come back. Can you? Okay, great. Okay. All good. So we're good to go. Please. Yeah, but that's yeah. Just put it on. Sorry, just give us a second. Okay, can you come back? We just hear the interpreters. It's come back. Okay, great. Okay. All good. So we're good to go. Please. Yeah, but that's. Yeah. Headphones, yes. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, just give us a second. We just try to fix this. Okay. Okay, But it's on speaker. No, now. Yeah, is it just fine?
Is it a
Yeah.
headphone problem?
Okay, I don't see.
None of us can hear. Okay, great.
Great, okay. Cool, okay, so we're good to go. So this session is based around the thematic of CSW. So the CSW, I can quickly just talk about it in terms of the thematic area this year as well. It's a Commission for Status on Women and is the largest women's rights feminist congregation that is held by UN Women every year. And for the first time, they are centering digital rights and technology, although not exactly with that framing, in CSW. And the objective of this convening is also to speak back to that framing of whether we want to look at technology as a neutral tool that can just be used to empower women in the kind of framing of tech and innovation for empowerment, or if we want to challenge the dominance of big tech, if we want to talk about how feminist movements actually use technologies, what are our experiences, what are our challenges and risks that we actually face while using technologies through corporations, through government, and in that challenging, how can we center a kind of feminist approach and appropriate technologies for our movements as well. So the folks that we'll be hearing from today in Bangalore as well as in New York, we have been using technologies in all kinds of ways, and we have been challenging corporations and governments in all kinds of ways as well. So we kind of bring that into this space. And the format, of course, today is new. It's also to have fun with, and the aim of the session is to try and build a connection across these two rooms and have a human connection, even though we are based in, we are talking out of different cities in different time zones. But if we can come together in this room and have a kind of connection with each other, so that's the primary objective of being here today. And if we're able to take that with us at the end of the session, that's the primary goal here today. If we can just be friends. With that, we'll get started here, and I'll hand it over to Padmini to start us off. And we'll hear a little bit from the groups in Bangalore here today who come prepared with inputs into these thematic areas, and then we'll move into a kind of dialogue across the two cities. So go for it, Padmini. Yeah.
Okay, so it's really lovely to be surrounded by like-minded people. Our work at Design Beku is basically based on the premise of something that we call infrastructuring as mean. So it basically means that in order to ensure the sustainability of the kind of work that we do, the kind of interventions that we make, we believe that there needs to be infrastructures in place rather than, the kind of dominant model is, say, an NGO or a design agency coming into a space and then going away, which is not a very sustainable model. So we believe in working long-term with communities and fostering connections and relationships there. Honoring their expertise and their knowledge of the challenges that they meet in their everyday lives. And so what we bring to them is a facilitation when it comes especially to thinking through digital ways in which they can assert their rights, have kind of infrastructures that are that don't violate human rights. So these are digital infrastructures that are not embedded in surveillance or data collection, etc. This narrative is probably quite familiar for you who work with community networks. So we are trying to build an alternative model. The project that Maya Ramaka works with us on is called the Channapatna Health Library. Channapatna is a town outside Bangalore. Ramaka leads a group of health workers. She'll tell you more about her work. But what we've been doing with them is setting up a server, what we're calling a feminist server, because it's owned by the community. It is governed, the data on the server is governed by the community, and a Wi-Fi mesh. And the hope is that they can broadcast health information and kind of knowledge around local health practices through that Wi-Fi mesh to other people in the community. So it's an alternative digital infrastructure which isn't online as yet. And there are conversations that we're going to have about how it's going to be governed, how is that data going to be made public or not, or to what extent over the next year or so.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Padmini. Ramaka can maybe also talk about the work now.
ನಾವು ಒಂದು ತುಂಬಾ ಜನ ನಾವು ಆರೋಗ್ಯ ಉದ್ಯಮಗಳಾಗಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ ಚನ್ನಪಟ್ಟಣದಲ್ಲಿ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಈ ತರ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ನಮ್ಗೆ ನಾವು 10 years ಆಯ್ತು ಹೆಲ್ತ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಜನರ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ. ಈ ರೀತಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ ಏನಂದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಗಿಂತ ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗಿ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಜನಗಳ ಹತ್ರನೇ ಇದೆ. ಈಗ ಆ ಕಾಲದ ಜನರು ಯಾಕೆ 100 years ago ಅವರು ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಜೀವಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರು, ಮತ್ತೆ ನಾವ್ ಯಾಕೆ 60 years 15 yearsಗೆ ನಾವು ಕೈ ನೋವು ಕಾಲು ಮತ್ತೆ ನಮ್ದು ಫುಡ್ ಹ್ಯಾಬಿಟ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ.
One second, one minute. Can you folks hear the translation on the English channel? Nothing?
Not really.
We can start again. Okay. I think it might work now. Just we can try it out. I'm going to just
ಲೌಡ್ ಇರಲಿ,
and from the
ಸ್ಪೀಡ್ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಲೋ ಆಗಿದೆ.
ಸೆಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಕನ್ನಡ
ಮೊದಲಿಂದ ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿ.
ಬಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ಏನನ್ಸಿದಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವು BP ಡಯಾಬಿಟಿಕ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಒಂದು ಬರೋದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಮುಂಚೆನೆ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಪ್ರಿವೆಂಟಿವ್ ಸ್ಪೇಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಿದ್ದು. ಇದು ಏನಂದ್ರೆ ಬಂದಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಅವರು ಎನಿವೇ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಹತ್ರ ಹೋಗ್ತಾರೆ. ಬರೋದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಮುಂಚೆ ನಾವು ಲೈಫ್ ಸ್ಟೈಲ್ ನ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಇರ್ಬೇಕು, ಮತ್ತೆ ಆ ಕಾಲದ ಜನರಿಗೂ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಕಂಪೇರ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಬದುಕ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ, ನಮ್ಮನ್ನ ನಾವು ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಆರೋಗ್ಯವಾಗಿರೋ ದಿಕ್ಕಿನಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದೀವ ಇಲ್ವಾ ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಅಂಡರ್ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡಿಂಗ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋ ದಿಕ್ಕಿನಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ನೋಡಿದಾಗ ಜನರಿಗೆ ಆ ಕಾಲದ ಜನರು ಮತ್ತೆ ಈಗಿನವ್ರಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಅವ್ರದ್ದು ತುಂಬಾ ಆರೋಗ್ಯಕರವಾಗಿ ಯಾರಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅವ್ರದ್ದು ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೀರಿಯನ್ಸ್ ಏನು ಅಂತ ನೋಡುವಾಗ ನಮ್ಗಿಂತ ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗಿ ಈಗ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಒಂದಿನಕ್ಕೆ 50 ಜನ ಪೇಷಂಟ್ ನೋಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಕೌನ್ಸಿಲಿಂಗ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, ಮತ್ತೆ ಅವ್ರದ್ದು ಫುಡ್ ಹ್ಯಾಬಿಟ್ಸ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಏನ್ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಅವ್ರದ್ದು ಲೈಫ್ ಸ್ಟೈಲ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಏನ್ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಕಂಪೇರ್ ಮಾಡಿ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ದು ಸಮುದಾಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುವಂತ ಜನಕ್ಕೆ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಮಾಹಿತಿ ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ ಅಂತ ನಮ್ಗೆ 10 ವರ್ಷಗಳಿಂದ ಸಮುದಾಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗಿತ್ತು. ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಈ ತರ ಮಾಹಿತಿ ಅದೇ ರೀತಿ ಅದು ಹಂಗೆ ಅಳ್ದೋದ್ರೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಇದು ಮುಂದಿನ ಜನರೇಷನ್ಗೆ ಸಿಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಈಗಿನವ್ರಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಯಾಕೆ 50 ವರ್ಷಕ್ಕೆ 40 ವರ್ಷಕ್ಕೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಆರೋಗ್ಯ ವಿಚಾರಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಕಷ್ಟಪಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಯಾಕೆಂದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು 25ರಿಂದ 30 ವರ್ಷದೊಳಗೆ ಅವರು ಏನೋ ಒಂದು ಕೆಲಸ ಸಂಪಾದನೆ ಈ ತರದಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಮೇಲೆ ಮುಂದೆ ಹೋಗಿ ನೋಡಿದಾಗ ಆಮೇಲೆ ಆರೋಗ್ಯ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಬೇರೆ ಏನೋ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ಸ್ ಹತ್ರ ಹೋಗುದು. ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ನಮ್ದು ಯಾವ್ದು ಬದುಕಿನ ರೀತಿ ಏನಿದೆ ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಬದಲಾಯಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಒಂದ್ ವಿಚಾರ ಇತ್ತು. ಇದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ನಾವು ತುಂಬಾ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಏನ್ ಜನರು ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಇರೋಂತ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ನಾವು ಆರೋಗ್ಯ ಉದ್ಯಮಗಳು ಏನಿದೀವಿ ಅವರು ತುಂಬಾ ಅದನ್ನ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಕಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ.
ಲೌಡ್ ಇರಲಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಸ್ಲೋ ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಲೇಷನ್ಗೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಕಷ್ಟ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ.
ನಾವು ಚನ್ನಪಟ್ಟಣದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಹೆಲ್ತ್ ಲೈಬ್ರರಿ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಮಾಡಿದೀವಿ. ಆ ಹೆಲ್ತ್ ಲೈಬ್ರರಿನಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ತುಂಬಾ ಜನಗಳ ಜೊತೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗಿರೋಂತ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ನ ಕಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಬಟ್ ನಾವು ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಎಲ್ಲಾನು ಕಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ, ಅದು ನಮ್ಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿದೆ. ನಾವೇ ಎಷ್ಟೊಂದ್ ಜನ ನಾವು ಆರೋಗ್ಯ ಉದ್ಯಮಗಳು ಮತ್ತೆ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಸೇರಿದಂಗೆ ನಮ್ದು ಲೈಫ್ ಸ್ಟೈಲ್ ಕೂಡ ಆದಷ್ಟು ಚೇಂಜ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಇದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಒಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಇಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಅಟ್ಲೀಸ್ಟ್ ಎಲ್ಲಾ ಜನರಿಗೂ ಇದು ತಲುಪಿದ್ರೆ ಆ ಜನರಿಗೆ ಇದು ಅನುಕೂಲ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ನಾವು ಇದನ್ನ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದು. ಇದನ್ನ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ತಿಳಿಸ್ಬೇಕು, ಇದು ಜನರಿಗೆ ಹೆಂಗೆ ರೀಚ್ ಆಗ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ನೋಡುವಾಗ ನಾವು ಇಡೀ ಚನ್ನಪಟ್ಟಣದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು 7-8 ಕಡೆ ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಬೆಸ್ಟ್ ನೆಟ್ವರ್ಕ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಅದು ಎಲ್ಲ ಆ ಲೋಕಲ್ ಏರಿಯಾದಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ರು ಅದು ತಲುಪೋ ರೀತಿ. ಅದು ಮಾಡಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಮುಂಚೆ ನಾವು ಚಿಕ್ಕ ಚಿಕ್ಕ ಗುಂಪುಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ ಈ ತರದ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಇದೆ, ಮತ್ತೆ ನೀವು ಇದನ್ನ ರಿಸೀವ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು, ಮತ್ತೆ ಇದು ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿದೆಯಾ ಇಲ್ವಂತ ಚಿಕ್ಕ ಚಿಕ್ಕ ಗುಂಪುಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ಮೀಟಿಂಗ್ ಮಾಡಿ ನಾವು ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಅವ್ರದೇ ಫೋನ್ಗೆ ಕಳ್ಸಿದಾಗ ಅವ್ರು ಅದನ್ನ ಇದುವರೆಗೂ ಜನಗಳಿಗೆ ಏನ್ ಅನ್ಸಿತ್ತು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಈ ಫೋನ್ ಇಂದ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು, ಮಕ್ಳೇನೋ ಓದ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾ ಇದಾರೆ, ನಮ್ಗೇನು ಯೂಸ್ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಮತ್ತೆ ಇದರಿಂದ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಕುತ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಅದೇನೋ ಫಿಲ್ಮ್ ನೋಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಕುತ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಈ ತರದೆಲ್ಲ ತುಂಬಾ ಜನಕ್ಕೆ ಆ ಫೋನ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಅಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಇದಿಲ್ಲ. ಈಗ ಏನಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಓಕೆ, ಫೋನಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ತರದ್ದು ಆರೋಗ್ಯದ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಇದೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. ಫೋನಲ್ಲಿ ಬರೀ ಬೇಡದೇ ಇರೋ ವಿಚಾರಗಳೇ ಇರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಫೋನಲ್ಲೂ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಅಟ್ಲೀಸ್ಟ್ ನಮಗ್ ಬೇಕಾಗಿರುವಂತ ವಿಚಾರಗಳನ್ನ ತಗೊಂಡು ನಾವು ಕೂಡ ನಮ್ಮ ರೀತಿ ನೀತಿಗಳನ್ನ ಹೇಗೆ ಬದಲಾವಣೆ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬಹುದು ಅಂತ ಜನರಿಗೆ ಅನ್ಸಿದೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು, ಇದು ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ಹೆಲ್ತ್ ಲೈಬ್ರರಿ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ತುಂಬಾ ಚಾಲೆಂಜಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಇತ್ತು. ಏನಂತಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವ್ಯಾಕೆ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಕೊಡ್ಬೇಕು, ನಮ್ ವಿಚಾರ ಬೇರೆಯವ್ರೊಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಶೇರ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಡಿ, ನಮ್ ವಿಚಾರ ಅದು ನಮ್ ಜೊತೆನೆ ಇರ್ಲಿ, ನೀವ್ ಅಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಹೆಸರು ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಬರೋದು ಇಷ್ಟ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಈ ತರದ್ದೆಲ್ಲ ಜನರು ತುಂಬಾ ಇದು ನಮ್ಗೆ ಬೇಡ ಅಂತ ಕೂಡ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಬಟ್ ಇದು ನಾವು ಎಲ್ಲಾ ಜನರಿಗೂ ತೋರ್ಸುವಾಗ ನಮ್ಮನೆ ಪಕ್ಕದವರು ಯಾರೋ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಶೇರ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಇವ್ರಿಗಿಂತ ನನ್ಗೆ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ, ನಾನು ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಕೊಡ್ತೀನಿ, ನಮ್ಮನೆಗೂ ಬನ್ನಿ, ನಾವು ಈ ತರದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಔಷಧಿ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವಿ, ನಮ್ಮ ಮಾವನವ್ರು ಕೊಡ್ತಿದ್ರು, ಅದು ನನ್ಗೂ ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಅದನ್ನ ನಾನ್ ಕೂಡ ಇವಾಗ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಯಾಕೆಂದ್ರೆ ಆ ಕಾಲದಲ್ಲಿ ತುಂಬಾ ಮನೆ ಮದ್ದುಗಳು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ಕಾಫಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಕೆಮ್ಮಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಜ್ವರ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಅದನ್ನ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭದಲ್ಲೇ ಯಾವ್ದಾದ್ರು ಮನೆ ಮದ್ದುಗಳನ್ನ ಇತ್ತು. ಬಟ್ ಇವಾಗ ನಾವು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗೋವರೆಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಅದು ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಹತ್ರ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕು, ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗೋವರೆಗೂ ಇರೋದು, ಆಮೇಲೆ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಹತ್ರ ಹೋಗೋದು. ಬಟ್ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಇದೆಲ್ಲಾನು ಕೂಡ ನಮಗ್ ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಗರ್ಭಿಣಿ ಆರೈಕೆ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಆಗ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭಿಕ ಹಂತದಲ್ಲಿ ಇರೋರ್ಗೆ ಇದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ಮೋಟಿವೇಶನ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ನಾನು ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಇರ್ಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದು ಕೂಡ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ತುಂಬಾ ಜನ ಗರ್ಭಿಣಿ ಸ್ತ್ರೀಯರು ಕೂಡ ಬೇರೆಯವರು ಅನುಭವದಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಿದೆ ಅದನ್ನ ವಿಚಾರಗಳನ್ನ ತಗೊಂಡು ಅವರು ಕೂಡ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಚೇಂಜಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಬೇರೆಯವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿರೋದನ್ನ ಆ ವಿಡಿಯೋಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ನೋಡಿ ಅವರು ಕೂಡ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಅವರು ನಾವು ಕೂಡ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ, ನಮ್ಗೆ ಈ ತರದ್ದು ನನ್ನ ಗರ್ಭಿಣಿ ಒಂದು ಲೈಫ್ ಜರ್ನಿ ಈ ತರ ಇತ್ತು, ನಾನು ಕೂಡ ಶೇರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳೋ ಕೆಲವರು ಮುಂದೆ ಬಂದು ಅವರು ಕೂಡ ಅವ್ರ ಅನುಭವನ ಶೇರ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಬಟ್ ಒಂದು ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಏನಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಅವ್ರು ಓದಿರುವಂತದನ್ನ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಏನ್ ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ, ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಏನ್ ಮೆಡಿಸಿನ್ ಕೊಡ್ಬೇಕು ಇದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದೊಂದ್ ರೀತಿ ಒಳ್ಳೇದು, ಎಲ್ಲ ಜನರಿಗೂ ಅದ್ ಸಿಗ್ಬೇಕು. ಬಟ್ ಇದು ಕಾಯಿಲೆಗಳು ಮತ್ತೆ ಆರೋಗ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಇರ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಪ್ರಾರಂಭಿಕ ಹಂತದಲ್ಲಿ ಅದನ್ನ ಗುರ್ಸೋದ್ ಹೆಂಗೆ, ಮತ್ತೆ ನಾವು ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದು ಅನುಭವ ಇರೋರು ಅದನ್ನ ಹೇಳ್ದಾಗ ಅದನ್ನ ರಿಸೀವ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದು ಕೂಡ ತುಂಬಾ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ಒಂದು. ಮತ್ತೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಜನ ರಿಸೀವ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಅನುಭವ ಇರೋರು ಹೇಳಿರೋದು ಕೂಡ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಚನ್ನಪಟ್ಟಣದಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇರೋಂತ ಜನರು ಏನಂದ್ರೆ ಅದೇ ಊರಿನ ಜನ, ನನ್ ಪಕ್ಕದ ಹಳ್ಳಿಯವ್ರು ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಪಕ್ಕದ ಮನೆಯವ್ರು ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಇವ್ರೇ ಈ ರೀತಿ ಹೇಳಿರೋದು, ಇದನ್ನ ನಂಬಬಹುದು, ಇದು ಯಾವ್ದು ಫೇಕ್ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಜನರಿಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗಿರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಇದನ್ನ ರಿಸೀವ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಆಲ್ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ ಎಲ್ರು ಫೋನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ತರದ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಇದ್ರೆ ಈ ವೀಕ್ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಕಳ್ಸಿದ್ದೀರಾ, ಅದು ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿತ್ತು ಅಂತ ಫೀಡ್ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕೂಡ ಕೆಲವರು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಏನಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಇದು ಕೆಲವ್ರಿಗೆ ಟೆಕ್ನಾಲಜಿ ಉಪಯೋಗಿಸೋದಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಇದು ಏನೋ ಅದ್ರಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲ ತುಂಬಾ ಸರಿ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಇದು ಬೇರೆದೇ ಏನೋ ಮಕ್ಳಿಗೆ ಇದ್ರ ಮೇಲೆ ಪರಿಣಾಮ ಬೀರುತ್ತೆ, ಇದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಬೇರೆ ಎಲ್ಲಾ ಮಕ್ಳು ಇದರಿಂದ ಹಾಳಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಇದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಓದು ಮಾತ್ರನೇ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಈಗ ಕೋವಿಡ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ರು ಫೋನ್ ಉಪಯೋಗಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಬಟ್ ಇವಾಗ ಎಲ್ರು ಫೋನ್ಗೆ ಅಡಿಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿರೋದಕ್ಕೂ ಬಟ್ ಎಷ್ಟು ಬೇಕೋ ಅಷ್ಟು ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಟೆಕ್ನಾಲಜಿ ಉಪಯೋಗಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅದನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ಮಕ್ಳಿಗೂ ಯೂಸ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಅವ್ರಿಗೂ ಯೂಸ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಅವ್ರ ಮನ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ಇದೆ.
Okay, thank you so much, Ramaka. I think that's really starting to think about what tech access actually looks like when we build these kinds of solutions and we actually take them into communities. Then how can we actually what are the kinds of challenges we face in access to information and access to tech, and what that looks like for different communities. So thanks so much, Ramaka, for sharing that. And Nisha, would you like to go next in terms of
Sure.
picking up some of these themes or?
Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about two kinds of work that I'm involved with. One is the educational space, and the other is the public action kind of space. So in the education space, often with the kind of community work that I'm involved with, and my fellow theatre makers are also involved with, we're often using open source tools that can be kind of downloaded on phones, things like poster making tools like Canva, and just simple photography and video editing tools, which kind of help our student learners or adult learners of marginalized communities who have very little access to tech to kind of express themselves in languages that they're familiar with, with idioms, just aesthetically what they're comfortable with, just color and visual expression that they're comfortable with. And it goes a long way in helping them frame themselves and their story within the community, within the larger kind of socio-political context that we're in. And these are, young adults and workers who are often sitting in the very kind of extreme tension of marginality. These are people who are either marked in many ways, either their clothes or their names or their, the areas that they live in, they're marked out as people who may not belong in certain spaces in the city. So using tools like this, sometimes even it might be one phone across 5 adults who are able to download these kinds of tools and use them, but to kind of use them in ways that allow them to express in spaces like this where they probably never have attempted to articulate some of these things around gender roles, around gender expectations, around worker dignity, and what does it mean to feel embodied versus disassociated from body, things like that. So that's, and again, the tools that we use, very, very simple stuff, but often the barriers to using them seem difficult in the beginning, but once we leap across it, then the learning is quicker, especially in cases where people have access to phones more easily. In the other kind of spaces, which is the public action space, I think what a bunch of us here in Bangalore are going through is extreme aversion to a lot of technology because of, again, the nexus between big tech and the government. We've had local activists here who've had quite, alarming incidents of, just action toolkits and stuff being checked, being used as material against them in conspiracy cases and things like that. So the aversion to using tech in our public action is quite high. That said, we're also struggling with what are the tools that we can use, because work still, has to get done. A lot of our work is across multiple locations. Many times our public action is, coordinated calls. I'm sure you're familiar with some of these things. So that tension is something we're constantly sitting with, because all around us, we have many such cases. We've lost count of activists, journalists, artists, whose very kind of, exposure to some of these shared documents, shared resources kind of puts them at risk. So I think broadly, these are the two things that I wanted to share, and maybe I'll come back in once we have more people sharing.
I think that's you said the word toolkit and it just runs in my mind like, oh my god, this is a trigger word. We should not be using this word because of the kind of backlash that people have been facing, and surveillance through the government and big tech being used as a tool for that. And I'm sure that there's lots of stories that will come up in this kind of area. So, Merin, did you want to? I'm assuming that you have like similar themes to pick up on as well in terms of challenging big tech. So, did you want to come in with that? As
Yeah,
well?
sure. Yeah, sure. So, drawing from my work on online gender-based violence for change, I would like to talk a little bit about how online violence and the big tech platform affordances or architecture that facilitate this violence act as a structural challenge for the use and access of digital technology by women, particularly women belonging to the marginalized group. So maybe I'll take this opportunity to share a few findings of a study that IT4Change conducted on abuse and misogynist trolling on Twitter directed against women in Indian public political life. So for the study, we selected a sample of 20 women who are active in public political life in India, and we kind of mapped and annotated the mentions received against their public profile for a period of 1 week. So many interesting findings came up. So we found that all women in our sample, regardless of their ideological and political position, received some amount of abuse and hate on Twitter. But the amount and the nature of abuse that women faced significantly varied depending upon her intersectional identity. So we found that Muslim women and Dalit women and political dissenters received an overwhelming majority of abusive messages. And another crucial finding was that so we definitely saw instances of threatening messages like rape threats or death threats being made against women, but far more common than that was trolling, which took the form of tongue-in-cheek jokes and remarks or sharing of misogynist memes or wordplay. So these are not overtly threatening or violent, but we cannot dismiss them as less serious forms of violence because the harm from such trolling is not due to the content of the message itself, but from the sheer volume and frequency of such messages on the platform. And that is enabled by the amplification of such abusive messages by the platform algorithm. So that is where we have to understand the role of the social media platforms. These platforms work on the logic of attention economy, where they monetize by grabbing the attention of the user. So the success of a message on these platforms depends upon the high engagement rate that it receives in terms of likes, shares, or retweets. So a message that gets a lot of engagement is automatically prioritized and amplified by the platform algorithms. Naturally, this sensationalist, divisive, abusive content gets picked up and gets made viral by the platform algorithm. So another important but disturbing finding that we found was that this tendency of platform algorithms to amplify the message was in fact actively exploited by perpetrators of online abuse to unleash attack against women. So we could see a kind of herd aggression, a pattern of herd where multiple anonymous accounts came together and they retweeted the same abusive messages one after the other against a tweet by a woman. So the message itself is not the content itself is not the problem, but the coming together of trolls using the platform affordances to make it viral is what is contributing to the harm here, which has a silencing effect on the women. So on these social media platforms, the acts of the aggressors or the perpetrators of online abuse receive the publicity or legitimacy that they want for their act. But at the same time, they can remain anonymous and escape from their any liability, any consequence. So that's what. So this structural, what we see here is a structural propensity of this platform to violence or to incentivize certain harmful or violent forms of behavior. So that's one of the crucial findings of the study that we conducted, how the platform structures and algorithms itself contribute to online gender-based violence and has a exclusionary effect on women. Yeah, so that's, maybe I'll come back later. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so we have one final intervention before we start unpacking all of these various themes around everything that has been brought up, and in terms of both risks and challenges, gender trolling, online violence, all of these issues that I know folks there have been working on as well. So we'll come back to these themes before, after we hear from the final speaker. So Neera.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Sorry, my voice is a little gone because of Bangalore's weather. But
Can you hear us okay though? Can you hear Neera? Okay, great.
But I just very want to quickly talk a little bit about when tech is not just a mode of resistance, but is actually your employer. In Bangalore, I've been working with the All India Gig Workers Union and All India IT Workers Union. And what we frequently see is that sort of tech companies are sort of lauded as providing employment in an otherwise bleak landscape of employment in India, especially for young professionals. But the reality of it often translates to very clearly workers losing benefits and losing concrete things that they would receive in a employment position outside of a tech company. So for example, there's a gig company in Asia, but I think also they're expanding to America now, called Urban Company, where they provide at-home services like manicures or pedicures at your doorstep, or cleaning services at your doorstep. So it's Uber Eats, but for every other need of your service professionals, from service professionals that you would want, if you can afford it. So we interviewed a lot of cleaning workers and a lot of makeup beauticians and estheticians in Bangalore, men and women, who work for the app, quote unquote, for the app, for the tech company, Urban Company, and face an entire array of employment problems that are not addressed by the company or by the government, because the government has no legalese around what a software firm is supposed to do currently. As like what gig work is a very new phenomenon for India. Only recently did California gig workers unionize, and that's such a recent event in the US. It's going to take even longer in India because the oncoming of this type of technology has been very new. But what we found was that everything, even though people who are consumers of the app and customers of the app, for whom like a cleaning service is a click away, the translation of that in very real concrete terms is a person who doesn't have any healthcare insurance, doesn't have any employment papers, doesn't have any fixed salary, works only on a percentage of the commission that they get, has to maintain a certain number of, has to pay Urban Company the platform. And this works even for Ola, even for Uber in India, even for a lot of these other big apps, has to pay the platform in order to maintain their profile on there as a service provider. And so what we see is that in that way, tech not only becomes their employer, but also their reason for not being able to resist against the challenges that the employment is arising. Because if they do raise their voice about anything, instantly their profile gets blocked, they're removed from the platform, they're not able to provide services anymore. And in this environment and context like India's, where unemployment is incredibly high, they have very few chances of gaining employment somewhere else. And so the platform is sort of their last attempt at sort of gaining some income for their family. And that also is taken away when they try to fight against the injustices done to them by the corporations. This isn't purely a private sector phenomenon, because there were protests by Urban Company workers in Delhi, a different part of India. And what we saw after those protests was how the government and the police force used data from the company and the platform to arrest women who were part of those protests. So there was clearly a collusion between the private sector and the state in order to make sure that workers don't go out of the toll line, or don't resist what's happening to them. But just what I'm trying to say is trying to think of like tech also as a very active employer, and what that employment sort of facilitates in terms of restrictions, in terms of onslaughts against worker rights and women's rights, would be something also to think.
Yeah, thanks so much, Neera. So I'm hearing from my colleague in New York that we can break soon, but did we want to hear from you folks in terms of initial responses to all of these different themes that have been that we've been talking about, and then we can break for a little bit and come back into a more kind of dialogue and exchange.
Each other.
Anyone.
Just from listening, especially in regards to access to healthcare, and the kind of cyberbullying, for example, that we see online, I can definitely relate to those. It's really the same thing back in Jamaica, for example. And I think we have taken similar kind of approaches to improve our access to health, especially for queer women and for trans women who, upon like entering a lot of our health spaces, are immediately met with stigma and like discrimination. And what we were able to do, for example, we were able to form a partnership with the Ministry of Health in Jamaica, where we were able to train healthcare workers and other frontline workers to kind of educate them more about, like the experiences of LGBTQ women and just how they could be able to improve their services back home. So those kind of experiences sounded very similar to what we experienced. And we had the panel yesterday when we talked about online gender-based violence and just how it impacts LGBTI plus people. And it's really the same things that we face around the world. It's always just very interesting to hear from other peoples in different parts of the world. But yeah, I'm looking forward to really getting further into the discussions and just seeing how we can maybe take some of the best practices from what you have been doing in that side of the world, and how we can maybe do those on our side of the world. So yeah, it's been very interesting and very good so far, just hearing all the work that you amazing women have been doing. And yeah, looking forward to hearing more. I hope they understand what I say.
Yeah, we can hear you. I think there's just an issue with the translation channel. So it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So what maybe we could do is, because we're just trying to get the interpretation back for Ramaka, we can break for a quick 10 minutes and then continue the thread from there. If that's okay with you folks?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, 10 minutes? Okay. See you in 10. Yes, no, water, yeah.
ನನ್ನ ಫೋನಲ್ಲಿ ಬರ್ಸಕ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ಇವ್ರ ತಲಕಿ ಕೇಳ್ತಾರೆ ನನ್ನ ಫೋನ್ ಈಗ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಲ್ಯಾಗ್ ಇದೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಇದು ನೋಡಿ ಇದು ಆನ್ ಇಲ್ಲ
बंद हो जाएगा वो बटन
ಸಮುದಾಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಆರೋಗ್ಯದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದು. ಬಟ್ ನಾವು ಪ್ರಾರಂಭದಲ್ಲಿ BP, ಶುಗರು ಇದೆಲ್ಲದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆನೇ ಜನರು ಇದನ್ನ ತಡೆಗಟ್ಟೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ನಾವು ವರ್ಕ್ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕೆ ಅಂತ ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದು. ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಒಂದು 5 ಜನ ವಾಲಂಟಿಯರ್ನ ಹಳ್ಳಿಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಸೆಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ನಾವು ಅವರನ್ನ ತರಬೇತಿ ಕೊಟ್ಟು ನಾವು ಹಳ್ಳಿಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕೆ ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ನಾವು ಮತ್ತೆ ಅವಾಗ ನಾವು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಒಂದು 20-25 ಜನವರೆಗೂ ನಾವು ಚನ್ನಪಟ್ಟಣದಲ್ಲಿ ವಾಲಂಟಿಯರ್ ತಗೊಂಡು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಆ ಮಧ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಏನು ಅನಿಸ್ತು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಜನಗಳು ತುಂಬಾ ಆ ಕಾಲದ ಜನರು ತುಂಬಾ ಆರೋಗ್ಯವಾಗಿರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರು, ತುಂಬಾ ವರ್ಷ ಇರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರು. ಮತ್ತೆ ಈಗ ಯಾಕೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಬೇಗ ಬೇಗ ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಆರೋಗ್ಯ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ದು ಲೈಫ್ ಸ್ಟೈಲ್ ಏನಿದೆ, ನಮ್ದು ಫುಡ್ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ತಿಂತಾ ಇದೀವಿ, ಮತ್ತೆ ದೊಡ್ಡವ್ರಿಗೂ ಈಗಿನವ್ರಿಗೂ ತುಂಬಾ ಭಿನ್ನವಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಏನಿದೀವಿ ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆನೇ ನಾವು ಆರೋಗ್ಯದ ಬಗ್ಗೆನೇ ಒಂದು ವಿಚಾರಗಳನ್ನ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಮಾಹಿತಿ ಕಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಆ ಮುಂದಿನ ಪೀಳಿಗೆವರೆಗೂ ಅದು ಪ್ರಯೋಜನಕ್ಕೆ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ನಮಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಅದು ಯೂಸ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಹೆಲ್ತ್ ಲೈಬ್ರರಿ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಚನ್ನಪಟ್ಟಣದಲ್ಲಿ ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ನಮ್ದು ಯೋಚನೆ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ನವೀನ್ ಅವರು ಕೂಡ ಹೆಲ್ತ್ ಲೈಬ್ರರಿ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಅವರೊಂದು ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ತರಾನೇ ಅದನ್ನ ತಂದು ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಜನದ ಒಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಸೇರಿ ನಾವು ಹಳ್ಳಿಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಏನು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವಿ ಅವರ ಮುಖಾಂತರ ಮಾಹಿತಿನ ಸಂಗ್ರಹಿಸೋದು ಮತ್ತೆ ಅದು ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ತಲುಪೋ ಒಂದು ನಿಟ್ಟಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ನೆಟ್ವರ್ಕಿಂಗ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅವರೆಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಆ ಥರದ್ದು ಎಲ್ಲ ಏಜೆನ್ಸ್ಗೂ ಆ ಥರ ಸೌಲಭ್ಯಗಳನ್ನ ಕಲ್ಪಿಸ್ಕೊಟ್ರೆ ಇದು ಒಂದು ಹೆಲ್ತ್ ಲೈಬ್ರರಿ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ರೀಚ್ ಆಗೋ ಥರ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು ಅಂತೇಳಿ ನಾವು ಇದನ್ನ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ.
Do we know if there are more people joining now or should we start?
Okay, okay, done.
So they said that 3 more people are joining. Maybe we can start.
Yeah,
and-
so. Okay, yeah, let's do that. So, yeah, maybe we can just dive into one of these threads around what we were talking about earlier in terms of how do we hold corporations and governments accountable in all of our different contexts and the role of tech in doing that. So anyone who wanted to jump in?
I actually wanted to respond.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to respond to what was being said before the break about working with the government around access to healthcare. I think one of our big issues here is that there is a big push towards digital health services and a digital health stack, which means that all of that data is being taken by the government. And while centralized data is useful in some regards, it also is a way to, say, target marginalized communities. So, which is one motivation actually behind the, all this data to be readily available. And we want the community to own the data and decide what happens to the data. So working with the government is a little potentially difficult in these circumstances.
Very diplomatic of you. Suddenly saying it in a very diplomatic way.
I think we are stuck or something because they're looking at us. Glorious face is like not encouraging.
Oh. Are you able to hear us?
We can hear you. You've gotten suddenly very small on our end, so they're working on the technology.
Oh, okay. It's okay, na?
Yeah, but should we continue? Are we big again?
I think continue. Yeah, you can continue.
Okay, thanks, Steph. Sorry, Padmini, you were saying.
No, I don't actually know whether they heard that. But
Yeah. Did you hear what Padmini said about the Indian government? Okay.
But it's also to add on to what Padmini is saying, it's also about the laws in place. So this is not necessarily one government's problem, or it's also because data is used retrospectively, data privacy is not taken as seriously. So it's because of this. It's not just because of one government or one health policy, but it's because in general, data is collected and then decided what it needs to be used for. And multiple sets of data are talking to each other without our knowledge. And we don't get to opt out of some of these things because they are directly connected to benefits or directly connected to our ability to access systems, things like that. Yeah, just some context.
Okay.
Are we live for you, Frozen?
Yes. Can you hear us? Can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Okay, there's a lag.
Okay, there's a lag. But yeah, Nisha was just talking about the use of biometrics for surveillance. And I don't know if Cynthia, you wanted to come in there because I know that APC has been doing a lot of work with structurally silenced women and communities as well.
Yeah, thanks everyone for all these, for all your thoughts and for sharing the work that you have been doing. As you, APC works and looks at broad issues related to the intersections of human rights and digital rights, but I would like to take this chance to focus on the theme that we're addressing around feminist technologies. And as pointed out earlier, community networks are advancing themselves as a way to navigate a lot of broader issues that communities and societies might face across the world and try to innovate ways that we can address certain problems in a way that's ground up and that's not imposed on communities. And I think a lot of the problems that we are facing today in the tech spaces is about this imposition where we feel that we really do not have any sense of agency and control over the usage, over the design, over the way that we approach these machines that are updated on our behalf, that push us out, that make us use a certain language. For example, English is not my first language, yet a lot of the things that we find related to information, related to knowledge, is imposed on us. Even these days, a lot of our affects and the way that we consume things on the internet has become very globalized. And community networks are ways to tell us that, hey, let's pause, let's imagine things differently. And when they are imagined with feminist principles in mind and with local feminism that embeds all the intersections of what the earth that these communities inhabit can face, they can and they are meeting the needs of communities in a way that feels a lot more in harmony than when we see that big tech and governments and different maybe service providers are doing instead. And I think what has been pointed out is also the issue of trust. For example, in the work that Maya and Design Beku have been doing in community networks is really taking the time for communities to understand how can we use these technologies to really advance our lives and not to have them consume us. Or to take away the wealth and breadth of our knowledge for them than to sell them as data. So I think there's like a lot of intersections and cross-cutting issues when it comes to community networks. For example, we work with communities in rural Brazil that have, in a way, during COVID, supported a lot of the women in the village where they live in and which they inhabit, and as a way to teach them about technology, to teach them about phones and the internet, and created a local library for things related to topics that matter to the women in these communities. And they did them through taking a lot of time in a methodology that they called coffee and cake. So they would invite women to sit in a circle and also use ancient technologies that have been around for such a long time, like talking about technologies that women have always innovated and led. And not to feel that we are, because also to face it, that women are excluded from STEM, from all these scientific spaces, whether through not being able to participate in the education, or then when they do, maybe not given same job opportunities, or feeling that they can actually be leaders and, taking on a bigger and more critical role in how these technologies are being designed and utilized. So it's like community networks offer a place where people are told, hey, let's slow down a little bit and let's not get into the rush of digital technology and feel like this is something that we do not understand, because we can understand it. And so there are many examples, but I'll stop here and make room for people here to intervene and to give their thoughts. But yeah, thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm so sorry to interrupt. We just want to fix a quick tech issue that we're having here in our portal. So if you don't mind waiting just a couple minutes, Riti and I will coordinate here and just to disconnect you guys for a minute and connect you again.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Easy. Also, make sure you're connected to your best Wi-Fi, because it's showing up here first that you have.
Even I was listening to this.
We don't
Oh,
need.
okay, so should we do quick introductions, very short, very brief for the three of you, and then we can jump back in.
Can they hear us?
Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, yes, but we don't like, we just speak or?
Yeah, just like
Yeah. Love the confusion. Go for
Just
it.
arrived, so sorry, apology for that. Okay, I can start. Hi, everyone. My name is Vivi. I work for International Women's Rights Action Watch Asia Pacific as program officer. I am Indonesian and I'm usually based in Bali, Indonesia. Yeah, that's it.
I can go next. My name is colleague. I'm Shanti. I also work with International Women's Rights Action Watch Asia Pacific, Euro Asia Pacific. I'm from Nepal. I'm based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia.
Hi, Shanti.
Hey, and I am Rula. I am the strategic program coordinator for the International Domestic Workers Federation. I'm global, usually based in Israel.
Oh, can't hear Rula very well.
Yeah, Rula, you need to be slightly closer to the mic.
Can you hear me if I speak like this?
Yes, yeah. This is good.
So this is Rula, and I am the strategic program coordinator for the International Domestic Workers Federation. I work global, and I'm usually based in Tunisia.
Hey, really nice to have all of you with us. So to do a quick recap, I don't know how to do a recap of this, but we've been talking about a lot of things to do with the design of tech platforms, because they're all owned and operated by large companies, big tech, mostly based in the United States, and how can we use those technologies with our communities in a way that is not so disempowering. And the last thread that Cynthia was touching on was on how community networks can be a way to slow down and build trust in a community as we try to build tech in a more ground up manner rather than in a top down solutionist kind of way. So that's where we were at before we were interrupted just at the right moment by the tech. Okay, so does anyone here want to respond to that?
I actually had, well, a question. I think somebody mentioned best practices, and I don't think we can claim to have best practices either. We're all trying to find some solutions, but Ramaki, you want to speak? Okay.
ಒಂದೇನಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಈಗ ಯಾವುದೇ ಒಂದು ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಕಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು, ಈಗ ಸರ್ಕಾರದಿಂದ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಬೇರೆ ಎಲ್ಲಿಂದನಾದ್ರೂ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಬಂದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರು ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಏನ್ ಬೇಕು ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಅದನ್ನ ಮಾತ್ರ ಒಂದು ಮೇಲ್ ಲೆವೆಲ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅವ್ರು ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಏನ್ ಬೇಕು ಅದನ್ನ ಮಾತ್ರ ತಗೊಳ್ತಾರೆ ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ಬಟ್ ಅದನ್ನ ಗ್ರೌಂಡ್ ಲೆವೆಲ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅದು ಅಕ್ಸೆಸಬಲ್ ಇದೆಯಾ, ಅವ್ರು ಅಕ್ಸೆಸಬಲ್ ಕೊಡೋದೇ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಏನ್ ಬೇಕು ಮತ್ತೆ ಒಂದೇ ತರ ವಿಚಾರನ 4 ಜನರು ಒಂದೇ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿಯಿಂದಾನೇ ಕೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. ಈಗ ಒಂದು ಭೂಮಿ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಭೂಮಿದು ಒಂದು ಪಾಣಿ ಕೊಡಿ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಸರ್ವೇಯರ್ ಒಂದ್ ಕೇಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಮತ್ತೆ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ರೆವಿನ್ಯೂ ಇನ್ಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟರ್ ಬೇರೆ ಕೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. ಸೇಮ್ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್, ಸೇಮ್ ಆಧಾರ್ ಕಾರ್ಡ್ ನಂಬರ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಒಂದೇ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ 4 ಸರಿ ಕೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಉದಾಹರಣೆ, ಒಂದು ಅಂಗನವಾಡಿ ಟೀಚರು ಮತ್ತೆ ಆಶಾ ವರ್ಕರ್ ಏನ್ ವರ್ಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದಾರೆ, ಆ ವರ್ಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರೋ ಒಂದು ಹಿನ್ನೆಲೆ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಸೇಮ್ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಬಟ್ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಕ್ಸೆಸಬಲ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಅದು ಎಲ್ಲೋ ಹೋಗಿ ತಗೊಂಡೋಗಿ ಒಂದು ಹೆಲ್ತ್ ಸೆಂಟರ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಂಟ್ರಿ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಬಟ್ ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಮತ್ತೆ ತಗೊಳ್ಬೋದಾ? ಇವಾಗ ಪ್ರೀವಿಯಸ್ ಹೆಲ್ತ್ ಕಾರ್ಡ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಈಗ ಒಂದು ತಾಯಿ ತಗೋಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅದಾಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಹೋಗಿ ಎಷ್ಟೇ ಟೆಕ್ನಾಲಜಿ ಗೊತ್ತಿದ್ರು, ಎಷ್ಟೇ ಫೋನ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿದ್ರು, ನಾನು ಉಪಯೋಗಿಸಿದ್ರು ಕೂಡ ಅದು ತಗೊಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಮತ್ತೆ PHC ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಮೀಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲೇಬೇಕು, ಮತ್ತೆ ಆಶಾ ವರ್ಕರ್ನೇ ಮೀಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು. ಈ ತರನೇ ಇದೆ. ಬಟ್ ನಾವು ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಟೆಕ್ನಾಲಜಿ ಇಂಪ್ರೂವ್ ಮಾಡೋದ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಅಕ್ಸೆಸಬಲ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು ದೊಡ್ಡ ಮಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ ಅವ್ರು ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದಾರೆ ಅವ್ರ ಜೊತೆನೂ ವರ್ಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು. ಇದು ಯಾವ್ದು ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ತಗೊಂಡ್ರೆ ನನ್ನ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ನನ್ಗೆ ಸಿಗೋ ತರ ಅಕ್ಸೆಸಬಲ್ ಕೊಡೋ ರೀತಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅವಾಗ ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಅದು ಓಕೆ, ನಾನು ಇದರಿಂದ ಟೈಮ್ ಸೇವ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ನಾನು ಈ ತರ ಟೆಕ್ನಾಲಜಿ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡೋದ್ರಿಂದಾನೆ ನಾನು ಎಲ್ಲ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ತಗೋಬಹುದು. ಈ ತರದೆಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಎರಡೂ ಕಡೆನೂ ವರ್ಕ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಟೆಕ್ನಾಲಜಿ ಇನ್ನಷ್ಟು ಮಹಿಳೆಯರು ಉಪಯೋಗ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಿಕ್ಕೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡೋದಿಕ್ಕೂ ಕೂಡ ತುಂಬಾ ಹೆಲ್ಪ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. Next.
Did you folks manage to hear that on the translation? Okay, great. Yeah, so I think what Ramaka was really talking about as well was how governments come in and take all of this data from you. In this case, in the form of biometrics, from health workers who are delivering these essential services, but to be able to access any services, any social security, their wages, even they need to have access to biometrics through the Aadhaar card, which is being used by the Indian government to have a kind of 360-degree surveillance of its citizens without giving anything back to citizens who are actually signing up for these surveillance programs. So I don't know if people want to share similar experiences or reflections from your work as well.
Okay, so yes, so I think one thing that we are interested in learning about is data trusts and data governance, as in, so what are the practices that people are using with communities to decide what are the principles under which to share data. I think for us, that's something we're still trying to work out, because a community it's not homogeneous. It has different people wanting different things. So for a community-owned network, I think we currently feel that's a big challenge. So it would be great to hear if you have any examples or practices that you may have been using that worked or didn't work as well.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
There goes technology.
Can you repeat the question?
I think this is a repeat. Sure. So can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I was wondering about best practices around data governance by communities, because communities are not homogeneous, so different people want different things. So what we're trying to understand is how to ensure there is consensus in a community about how their data is being used. And so it would be great to hear if any of you have examples from your work or that you know of that you can share.
I don't have, but I think what you were sharing with me here, I think that's a nice example to share.
Sorry. Yeah, so I'm just gonna speak about a few, particular examples related to community networks where people have decided not to share their data at the moment on the internet. I think there's this idea that we have that maybe everything needs to be online in order for us to be seen or made visible. And I think in certain moments, one really needs to reflect around the strategic use of certain data. So maybe some data can be shared with allies or shared on certain platforms, but a lot of the communities that we have been working with and supporting decided that for them, it made a lot more sense to create intranets and create living archives of what they wanted to preserve or the data that they were collecting in order to use it locally or share it with trusted allies but not really place it on the internet. So really trying to think also of what is the digital technologies that we have been made to think of when we think of digital tech. Why do we always think that it needs to be related to the internet? And when it is, how can we actually use it to our favor? And I think also just like wiser and slower approach requires a lot of deliberation within the community, unfortunately. In a lot of the communities, there's also still power dynamics that need to be addressed and we need to be looking at. And as you pointed out, communities are complex. And I think really going back to using local spaces of communication, of how do we make a decision and who's around, who's actually making that decision for the community. Who is involved? Is it just usually men leaders who are making these decisions on behalf of everyone else? Is it more like older populations speaking for the young, or is there space for intergenerational dialogue, for all genders to be present, for all sexualities to be expressed? I think these are really important parameters to take into consideration. And also when we think about decision making, who can actually afford the time to come and attend several meetings, because that's also often not looked at, especially when it comes to care labor. So really trying to design these processes around people's times and around people's interests, and not to also disregard the emotional work that takes, that is needed also for these decisions to happen and for the design to happen. Because when we think of tech, we also think just about the product that we see or that we can touch, but not much about what really is the infrastructures of care that support this kind of work. Thank you.
Yeah. Do we have any responses here? Mihira, I was also wondering if you wanted to share, given that we're mostly talking about organizing and what that looks like in communities. Did you have any interventions there? Are you feeling okay?
Yeah. It's just bad.
Yeah. I think one thing that just for the new people, I work with the All India Gig Workers Union and the All India IT Workers Union chapters in Bangalore, which is supposed to be the IT hub of India, startup capital of India. But a lot of the times when it comes to data, I think a lot of workers, especially gig workers in Bangalore, equate data with violence in a way that whether it's data being used as violence against them or data of the violence that they face that they actually can't make use of, they can't take anywhere beyond themselves or each other. So for example, if you're a service provider for an app and you provide the service of say like a makeup or a facial where you go to a person's house to give them that service, you're entering a vulnerable space of another person's house where you're not protected. You don't have any protections from your employer or from the state. And there's also certain platforms mandate that only one worker is allowed inside the customer's house. So you actually don't have physically any backup of any other resource or person there either. And you don't choose the hours that you go in to perform that work. So in that case, if violence of any kind, whether it's physical, sexual, or mental, occurs against them, they actually can't do anything with that information, or what we might interpret also is with that instance of data, other than just complain about it and then not have their complaint heard by any mechanism, whether it's private. Women in this particular area are more likely to get these services. It's actually the workers who are generating that data by going to these women's houses and performing that service. But the company the platform that they're doing that service for is the one that takes that data and sells it to a different broker for marketing purposes or for advertising purposes. And the generators of that data, the workers, have no stake in that data. So I think data has these two different, which is also a type of violence against the worker because it is a part of wage theft as well. You're making money off of the worker without providing them any returns on it. So I think data especially gets most of the time, I think it's a negative word for workers, especially for women workers who are working for tech platforms. And so a conversation that even begins with how do you reinterpret that word itself might be useful.
Love that point.
Bula and Shanti, I'm wondering if you want to come in here.
No, it's for me, personally, it's kind of more of a learning for me. And I think we are at very basic level. And it's coming more from like after COVID when we started engaging more on different digital platforms. So, and in that sense, safety, security of like the constituencies that we are working with and the kind of struggle. So when I said basic, because we are still thinking of how to kind of provide support to the groups that we want to bring to the digital spaces and how to kind of make sure that they have connectivity, so something like establishing like connectivity fund. That was the basic step we started after COVID, because the communities, some of the communities that we work with, workers communities, so we want them to join our meetings, but they don't have internet access, they don't have phones. So I think that is where we are at in terms of like engaging and using technology, and the gig economy workers, the whole discussion around that is also in our agenda, and we are slowly trying to understand what are the challenges. And the thing that was just mentioned about it is like, I personally never thought about that, how the data, that is outside of their TOR, right? Like they are actually, they are employed to do something else, other services, to provide other services, but they are in that process generating data for the companies, and companies are making profit out by selling those data. So I think there is a lot for us to learn in this area and in this kind of conversation. So thank you. So that's all I have to say for now.
I will add about domestic workers. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
okay.
Yeah.
We thought you might want to add that,
The yeller in the room. So I will also start from COVID, because this conversation reminded me of vaccination specifically, and how workers, specifically migrant workers, had to register in order to access basic services that are health related. And then I saw many absurd publications about stigma related to COVID. Of course, that exists, but the issue with migrant domestic workers was not necessarily the health stigma, but that the vaccination status discloses their documentation status. So whether they were able to access this platform that was by the government, even when the government was, in brackets, providing a general amnesty for workers whose paperwork has expired, for example, they knew that the moment that they will try to access these services through the digital platform, all of this data is safeguarded, and there were no guarantees that it will not be used against them in the future, and also no visibility of how is it being stored. Is it information that goes to the Ministry of Health, or is it information that goes to the Ministry of Interior, to immigration services? How does that function? So a lot of the time when we were talking to domestic workers about health, that was the documentation status when it comes to data, a conversation in between the lines. We have a few experiences of domestic workers trying to engage with platform economy as well. So trying to create their own matching services where the domestic worker union or the domestic worker collective can match an employer with a domestic worker based on the location, the needs, etc. And some experiences have been more positive than others. And the reason for the negative experiences is that the virtual world or the online space is not a space where domestic workers can engage when their profession is not recognized. Because no matter how much they would invest in that online platform, if the government under which they operate does not recognize basic social protection or their right to unionize, the right for like freedom of assembly, freedom of association, then there was no guarantee that the protection could be extended outside of the community itself. And so people from the movement, women from the movement, they're saying that at the moment, there is no better remedy against gender-based violence than the support of a sister or the support of a comrade, but that's really all they have, and that is not necessarily translatable without third parties in the virtual space, because imperatively, if we organize in the virtual space, there are like eyes and ears that disturb that experience.
If I can add something to that as well, my name is Vivi. I don't know whether you catch it earlier. It seems like there's a connection problem. I came from Indonesia, where I think recently what we've seen is that like how the government role itself in terms of surveillance and the way that they kind of, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, sure. I came from Indonesia, where I think like the government surveillance in terms of how they use data itself and how they basically kind of like putting obligations in terms of policies to a lot of social media company, or not just social media company, like tech company, to actually provide data to the government in order for the government to be able to put surveillance to a lot of like sectors, not just like any basically like general society who use Twitter, who use Facebook, everything. There's a newest policy in Indonesia that requires them to submit those kind of data. If they don't submit those data, it means that they will not be able to operate in Indonesia. So that's also another issues that we've seen, that this is another way of like it's also like it's not a black and white situation even for the tech company itself, right? Because again, it's that what they want is a profit, and Indonesia is a big country. We are like very much involved in terms of like it's like internet is a big thing, like social media has become like a big part of people's daily life. So whether they like it or not, then like Indonesia is a big target. And I think like the situation between Indonesia and in India is also quite similar in terms of like the large number of populations and all of that stuff. So we've already seen a lot of activists from Indonesia that is being targeted in a sense. Suddenly they receive an email from Twitter, for example, saying that, hey, you need to delete this tweet. For example, they're criticizing government policy or any kind of issues that is being considered as a sensitive topic in Indonesia, and Twitter will send them an email saying that you need to delete this tweet. If not, then the government of Indonesia is require us to delete the tweet, automatically, because it has violated, for example, like issues that is going on in Indonesia. I think other than that, for me, working, with Euro Asia Pacific, we've seen that I felt like it is such a necessity. I feel like in data or like tech platform has become such a big necessity. Then sometimes we kind of even gamble in terms of the security, like that we kind of that whether we like it or not, we have to be connected, and this is the only access that we can have. And sometimes a lot of these companies putting safety and security responsibility to the people that's using it, despite that the security itself should come from the company to make sure that people who access their platform should be safe and also secure. And this discussion has been going on, I think, in terms of online gender-based violence itself. A lot of this tech companies saying like, oh, this is what you should do in order for you not to be harassed. It's just like, like it's another victim blaming kind of discussion, despite that you're the one who built this platform. How can you make sure that people who are actually using the platform should be safe and secure, right? So I think like that's also another discussions that I felt when it comes to, digitalize, people like to put the burden to us instead of like looking at themselves what they can do in terms of protecting us using the platform. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So Continuing from that point, I don't know, some of you were not there before the break. So I was speaking about how in a study that we conducted, we could see the platform itself, the social media platforms itself has a structural propensity to violence because of algorithm gamification and abusive messages. So so apart from the algorithms, we also see that platforms, as you just pointed out, do not take their responses to deal with online gender-based violence or any form of violence and hate is very inadequate. Take, for example, their content moderation systems. Particularly in the global south, these systems are not able to detect violent messages in regional languages. So there is a lack of regional representation. It's a lack of representation of the unique experiences of women in different socio-cultural contexts. So, for example, in India, caste is a big problem. So caste-based online violence is a big issue. But often it's found that the content moderators sometimes, if a content moderator has himself or herself not experienced casteism, they may not be able to recognize that a particular term is caste. So there's a lack of representation and consultation of women, gender and sexual minorities and other marginalized groups in the development of community guidelines and content moderation standards, and in developing automated tools to detect online hate. So the platforms are not doing enough. So we know that the solution cannot be left to platform self-regulation, and therefore we do need some sort of external by the government. But there also the problem, as you pointed out, is that through these laws, the government tried to co-opt platforms in their surveillance and censorship regime, where even in India, we could see instances during the COVID pandemic, a lot of tweets that criticized the Indian government for their handling of COVID pandemic were taken down by Twitter and other social media platforms. In fact, the government had asked them to take these tweets down. So we see that tension there. On one hand, you cannot leave the accountability question or regulation just to the platforms. We need the government regulation to come in. But we also see that undesirable situation of the government using the laws to kind of co-opt the platforms in their censorship and surveillance regime, which is not also violative of the rights of social media users. So even in India, we are in such a tricky situation. So recently, I think the government has also constituted, the government has been making a lot of changes in the laws relating to social media, and it has constituted something called grievance appellate committees, where if a person is whose tweet or whose message has been removed by the platform, or if a person is basically not satisfied with the decision made by the platform with respect to the content, he can take it to the government body. Now that's a government body being the decisions, the members are appointed by the government. So how much of independence can you expect from that body to take decisions? So that's a real problem that we face in India too. And I think there is earlier the platforms were escaping any form of liability by saying that they are just neutral, in the sense that they are only hosting content of the users. But today we know that that's not true. They are also making active choices with respect to the content that they post. So though we see that shift in the rules, it's still not enough. So I mean, I think as long as we operate within the capitalist or neoliberal structure, it's very difficult to realize the true potential of internet. And I think that's where the need to explore and create alternative online spaces that are decentralized, open, where gender justice and gender equality are not just afterthoughts to innovation, but they are the very essence that inform the design of these spaces. So I think, yeah, the alternate online spaces, creation of these are very critical.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I'm looking a little behind, sorry.
I'm hearing that we are
Out of time, we're out of
okay, we are out of time. But yeah, I feel like we were just getting started. Like I feel like it's been 15 minutes in this discussion, but it seems like we are out of time. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm just checking if we are, and I'm like,
I'm
yeah.
very reluctantly saying that this was a great closing note. Thank you, Merin.
Alternative spaces, that's
Yeah.
what we want.
Yeah, more of this, more of this. 15 more minutes, but no. Yeah, thank you so much, folks. I feel like we just started out and we have to stop, but yeah. Thank you.
Thanks to everyone joining us from New York, and thanks to everyone in Bangalore. Shall we give a shout out to folks here?
Big shout out to everyone here. Yeah, there was so much. Yeah, so many learnings from today, and hope that you could catch all of that.
Yes, definitely.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah, thanks to Ramaka, Nisha, everyone here, Padmini. Oh, I'm trying to finish everyone's name. Names here, Merin. Neera, thanks. Thanks, Rula. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
We're saying bye, and then no one is actually stopping us from talking. Should we just keep talking? No, but I got strict messages on my phone that we need to wrap up now.
Okay.
So thanks, everyone. Should we take a picture?
Yeah.
Shall we take a picture with them in our background? Like everyone can try.
Yeah.
Of ourselves.
Oh yeah, this is cool.
You want to take pictures with them?
And it's a little dark.
They're taking
Not gonna
selfies.
look great.
So they can
No, you
see their